relationships with clients and then responding to proposals for new programs. So it's kind of the whole front end before Chemonics would be awarded a program and then be implementing it in a developing country. So we are working on all the pieces of proposal development and preparing for new programs that are then competitively awarded to Chemonics. So happy to dive into that more as we move forward, but that's me.
Hey guys, thanks for that, Kylie. So my name is Troy Sweeney, and I am a 2018 grad. I studied economics at UVA, and took a couple of comm classes as well there as well. Most of my courses surrounding econ. So definitely glad to be here as well. Thanks again, Jen, for organizing this, and Flora for also setting this up as well. While at UVA, I also work for the Economics Career Office, who's hosting this event today. So definitely been working closely with Jen in the past, so definitely happy to be here. A little bit about me. I was actually second year transfer to UVA. I came in my second year after transferring from a school in Pittsburgh. Was pretty involved in the economics department there, as well as I mentioned, work with Jen as well. Had a lot of different experiences while I was at UVA surrounding different sales operations and business development internships and positions. Ultimately decided to join IBM Summer Program when I graduated, which is a 2-year rotation training program that consists of 6 months of in-depth sales training and then 2 9-month rotations after that in different inside sales rotations. Definitely can dive deeper into what exactly inside sales is versus field sales as well. But the rotation program that I'm in, I joined in the fall of 2018, and it's coming up on my 2-year mark now. So I should be transitioning toward a field position in the next couple weeks here. So can definitely share my perspective on what the differences between those are as well. But definitely happy to be here as well. And for those of you who may not know what IBM does, we're a global technology company that provides software, hardware, and cloud-based services for any size business. And I specifically work on the software side, but that might be changing here in a couple of weeks. But yeah, definitely looking forward to learning more about you all as well.
Thank you, guys. So into our next question. For a lot of econ majors, business development may not be the first thing that they think they're going to be ending up doing after they graduate. So how did you know that this is the field that you wanted to be involved in?
Sure. So I would say I definitely didn't know that it was the field that I wanted to be involved in. I knew I wanted to work in global development, which is why I paired my econ major with a major in global public health. That's just something I've had a passion for since I can remember, and really went into UVA knowing that that's what I wanted to do broadly, but I don't think I knew what that meant, or like, what is it, I wanted to work in international development, but like, what does that actually mean? Like, what do you do? And so I applied to like every internship under the sun after my 3rd year, and I had a really tough time. And the internship that I actually finally ended up getting was at a small USAID contractor that works in economic growth, and it was a business development position. And I don't know what business development was, but I was like, sounds great. They do development work. I was, so eager to get an internship. So I worked for them that summer in DC. And then that is really just where I gained my experience in kind of the development sector, was on the D side. And so then when I was looking to, looking for a full-time position, and I really had my eye on Chemonics just as a really large player in this space, that was kind of what I could speak to that I had done through that internship. And so that's kind of where I was slotted. But then I will say it wasn't what I ever intended to do. But now I've been in my position for going on 5 years on my team. So I've really grown to love it and to work on that side of things, because you really get to work across the company. The way that we work, you're always working on something new, which I really like. Usually a proposal is live for maybe 1 to 2 months. And so you're working on different projects all the time. which is something that I really like about it. And you're really working across the company, and you're really involved in a lot of the conversations around like the corporate budget, because we can only continue as a company if we are winning new projects. And so it's a really core part of the company's work. So I think you get a lot of exposure to leadership in the company when you're working on the BD side, because it's so core to the company's like financial health.
Yeah, I would say that I would definitely say that I have a slightly different take on this as well. So during undergrad, I was doing a ton of research trying to figure out what in the world I wanted to do after graduation, and I was having these conversations with Jen, weekly basis, monthly basis, pretty often here. And since I was working for the ECO, I was hearing from a lot of different alumni on their perspectives on what they did, and a lot of my friends at the time who were also in econ were thinking about going into consulting, banking, data analytics, sort of all those fields, which are definitely great fields, and there are reasons why the majority of econ majors, I think, are drawn to those. I guess for me, I was just exposed to so many different alumni while I was at UVA, and I put myself out there in a way to network as much as I could too. And it was actually during one of the ECO's events, an alumni came. His name was Ian Feeney. I'm sure that Jen remembers this, but he spoke a lot about working in business development at Oracle, being a hunter, having a flexible lifestyle, and it made me really wonder, like, why more people don't actually make the conscious choice to go into sales? Because a lot of people, I guess, and ultimately they make a decision down the line that, oh, well, I haven't really had a good experience in this field, I'm going to go and try sales. But I was wondering why undergrads especially didn't make that decision right after undergrad, because based on what Ian was saying, it all made sense. And I just felt, based on what he was saying, that working in sales would be a great fit for me, because it's all about relationship building. It's, it provides a really flexible lifestyle where you get to travel, and it's not a typical 9 to 5, at least working on the technology side of sales. But basically build your own schedule, because the only thing that matters at the end of the day is hitting your numbers, right? So every quarter, you're given a quota to hit, and as long as that you're hitting those numbers, it really doesn't matter what you're doing day to day. And I would say that the better managers aren't going to necessarily ask you what you're doing every second of the day, but obviously it really depends. But combining all these different factors, it seemed like the perfect combination for me and what I wanted for my career, because I wanted to travel and I wanted to have the freedom to be wherever I wanted to be on any given day. And while there's definitely commitment, obviously when you have meetings and whatnot to join. But I guess especially entry level, it just seemed like a really good fit for what I was looking for. And IBM has definitely been flexible with us and even encourages this lifestyle on us. So that being said, I don't necessarily think that this is where I'll be in 20, 10, even 5 years. But for right now, I think it's been a great place to start, given all the different aspects that I wanted to combine right after graduation.
That kind of leads really well into our next question, which is, what does a day working at your organization look like for you for an entry-level professional, and what technical skills should prospective hires have?
Sure. So I think one thing which I kind of started to allude to is that every day does really look different, which is something that I like. Right now, I'm working on a long-term, what we call capture effort. So you're preparing for a proposal to be released. And so you're thinking through, what is our like technical approach going to be for this new project. So for example, right now we're preparing for this large, it's a global supply chain program that will be providing pharmaceuticals and other health commodities to probably about 70 developing countries around the world. And then also it will have people working in these countries trying to strengthen their health systems to manage the flow of these products. So that's what the project is. But it's supposed to have a release of what they call a request for proposals, so an RFP in January. And so when they release a request for proposals, they want to know from Chemonics, who are you going to hire to run this program? What your approach to achieving the objectives of the program? What does your budget look like? And so those are all the pieces that my team will be putting together when this comes out in January. So any period up until actually have an RF in hand is called capture. So like right now, a day in the life is every morning I have a capture team meeting with the core group that's working on that program. It's like a $9.5 billion contract. So it's really high corporate priority. And so there's a team, like the one who's leading it, who I meet with every day, like this is all he does. So we meet every morning and we talk about like, okay, what's the reflection on yesterday? What's the look forward at today? And what are the priorities? And so we have a 30-minute meeting at 9 a.m. every single day. So that's the way my day always starts. And then I'm generally like right now working on that effort. So that can require a lot of different things, of a lot of partnering conversations. So when we look at a program, usually we're what we call the prime contractor, but we bring in a lot of other companies who bring certain niche experience. IBM is actually one of our subcontractors on this large program, for example. So we're trying to also find new partners. Like, what are some new innovative partners that are working in this space that we can present as part of our team for this proposal? So a lot of times, on a given day, I'll have a couple of conversations with a partner, and sometimes it's an intro. What do they do? What do we do? Could there be a fit here? Or sometimes, you're a little bit further down the line and you're really hashing out what is this partnership going to look like? Other times, well, I guess throughout the day, I do a good bit of budgeting. So I'm in Excel, either budgeting a budget for budgeting a budget, but working in Excel for a budget for a certain program that's upcoming, or updating our corporate budget that we do every month. That's kind of where the sales aspect comes in. Of sales very differently than the way Troy was talking about it, but what projects can we expect that are coming up that we may win, and how does that then translate into kind of the larger corporate budget? So I'd say there's a lot of meetings, like I said, with partners. There's some budgeting, there's some internal meetings, and then also like right now, actually, we just hired 2 weeks ago, maybe a UVA grad who just joined my team. So I also do a good bit of capacity building directly for her. So we've been meeting most days to talk through, what questions she has, or sometimes I'm, mentoring folks who are working on a proposal for the first time. So it's kind of a lot of different aspects of the partner conversations, budgeting, capacity building, and mentorship. And then I do a lot of writing, a lot of emails, and then also just a lot of writing strategies or sections, doing research. It's very, I'd say, multifaceted, and every day is different. But I do feel like I'm on the phone and in meetings all the time. Like I even miss being in the office with people because I feel like I'm with people all day, every day. But yeah, I know that was a little bit all over the place, but happy to answer any follow-up questions and pass it over to Troy.
Yeah, no, I would definitely echo a lot of that. As Kylie said too, every day is different for me as well. I think when you first start out in an entry-level sales role, a lot of it is pretty structured. So you'll have every day you'll have some sort of training and then some sort of sales activity to follow that, whether it's you have to have a certain emails that you send or certain calls that you'll have to make to customers, but it really just depends on your manager. Some are more lenient than others in terms of the progress that you're showing on a daily basis, and others focus on your more results at the end of the quarter. But once you get more experience under your belt and you figure out what's best for you and what's best for, I guess, your manager as well, achieving that sort of balance of having enough time to get the work that you have to get done and also saying yes to all the meetings that you get asked to join. I think that's definitely one of the challenges of working in business development and sales is if I said yes to everything, I would never have a second of the day to really do what I felt like I have to get done. So it's a lot about prioritizing what you're going to say yes to and what you're going to put off until tomorrow. Because for the most part, as I sort of mentioned in the intro, the most important thing at the end of the day for you and for your managers that you hit your numbers. So if hitting your numbers means saying no to other people's meeting requests for the last 2 weeks of the quarter, that's just something that you have to do, and you're just going to have to deal with that. Because if you say yes to those meetings and you don't end up hitting your number, then what was the point of having those meetings? So I guess it all comes back down to, and this is specific to technology sales that I'm in as well, just having this quota each quarter. Everything sort of ties back to how you can optimize your daily activities so that you can achieve those goals and not get bogged down with meetings all day. But I guess, for example, right now, a day in the life, wake up, check my email, see if there's anything on the schedule. If there's meeting requests, I'll respond to those as early as I can in the morning, and then budget the rest of my time in the day that's not taken up by meetings for doing outreach. So I do a lot of outreach to current customers, to new customers, to partners that we're involved with. So there's definitely a lot of emailing as well, a lot of connecting different parties. And it's also weekly check-ins with my manager. I guess so my job, really the biggest thing is building your schedule around how you can be the most effective. And it really just depends on the relationship that you have with your manager as well. But like, for example, some reps really like to make 150 calls a day, and that's just something that they do and that works for them. That's not exactly something that works for me. But so I found my own way to succeed that's not necessarily dialing all the time. But there's some companies and some reps that just succeed that way. So I think it's just mostly about figuring out the schedule that works best for you and being able to manage your calendar and blocking off time for yourself so that you're not busy saying yes to everyone else's ask. So I guess that's just a little way that I'd sum up my my day every day in the life here at IBM.
So I think we're going to begin with student questions. Students, if you have any questions, you can unmute yourself and then ask it yourself. Or as we mentioned before, you can send them through the chat to Jennifer Jones, and we'll read them out for you.
I could also, if there aren't any questions right this second, I can also ask them a question because I'm definitely curious to know something as well. So I guess one question that I would have to just hearing Kylie and I speak, what do you guys think are, I guess, like, why did you choose to attend this Zoom meeting today? Do you feel that sales or business development is something that you all would be interested in? What are some of the drawbacks that you've heard about sales that maybe Kylie and I could sort of counter for you? And then just to dig a little bit deeper into that, I just know that when I was going through undergrad, when I told my friends that I was pursuing a career in business development and sales, a lot of them questioned why I was doing that. So I guess I'd just love to hear from you all and anyone on their thoughts currently right now about a career in business development and why exactly you chose to join today.
I can answer that. I actually don't know too much about business development or sales, so that's why I wanted to attend this panel. And I think, Troy, you mentioned this before, but you weren't sure what you wanted to do after you graduate. And I'm kind of in the same boat. I'm still trying to figure out what careers I want to go into. So that's why I've been trying to like attend panels and like network as much as possible to kind of learn from you guys. And I like hearing about like what you do during the day. And the type of projects you work on. So
yeah, no, I think that's definitely great, especially the fact that you're attending all these different panels, because that was something that I did a lot during undergrad, was hearing from all the different alumni talk about what they did, made me realize not only what I would enjoy doing, but also what I would not enjoy doing. So when alumni would come on and say how they do a lot of data analysis and they sit behind their computer all day, that wasn't something that appealed to me. So just hearing them talk about like a career in their field and the different areas that, or the different job functions that they pursued day to day, made me rule out careers as well. I think that one thing for me, it was great to figure out different jobs that I would be interested in, but also crossing off possible jobs that I wouldn't exactly want to pursue, at least right now in my career as well, was definitely important too. So
yeah, and I think you also see between the two of us, perhaps, like how broad this field is. Like, they're incredible. Our jobs are, just hearing Troy talk, they're incredibly different, and you can kind of consider what I do sales, but it's more, we kind of really refer to it as pure business development, and it is a sales function, but it's a very different type of work than I feel like Troy's maybe in a more of a traditional, you're selling a service or you're selling a product and you have, quotas to hit, and it's a bit more individualized. Whereas we have like corporate targets that we have to hit ideally, and as a team, we're working together towards those larger programs, but it's not quite as transactional. So I think it's also just interesting to hear, which I think too is it's just an area that people don't know as much about. Like I said, I certainly didn't. But that's a really broad field and can look really different in different companies.
Yeah, no, and I would say that there's definitely a lot of different areas of business development as well, whether it's the different companies that you're working at, like selling at a large IT company like I do is very different from selling or doing business development at a B2C startup. So there's just such a vast difference within our fields. And for technology sales that I'm in specifically, like what happens at Amazon, Oracle, Google, IBM, all the major tech companies, the sales roles that are involved, I would say are a lot more based on your individual efforts, because that's how you're measured. You're not necessarily measured on your team's performance. There are definitely some instances where that's the case, but it sounds like, Kylie, for example, like your goals are mostly around like your day-to-day tasks and the projects that you're working on. You don't exactly have those specific targets to hit on a monthly and weekly basis, whereas like I do. So it just speaks to also the large difference within business development as well, because while it's a specific field that you can go into, there's so many different options that you can also go into within business development as well. So yeah.
Are there more follow-up questions from our students on the line? Because I sure have a lot. But
it looks like we have a student question in the chat from Benjamin.
Okay, great. All right, so I'll just read it out loud, but you all can see it. Given that neither of you initially saw yourselves working in business development, how has your career path lined up with the expectations you had when you started in business development?
So I think I would say I definitely got a bit of a taste of it when I'd done that initial internship, but I like look back now realizing when I interviewed like how much I maybe thought I knew but didn't. I would say, I mean, my overall career goal was to, like they say, work in the international development space, feel like I was, making an impact in the lives of people in developing countries. And I think my job it's kind of like 3 steps removed from that, because I'm working on, winning a new project, which then is going to be supporting, beneficiaries. But I think having a link to that work has definitely been kind of, I guess, aligned with what my career goal was. And I think also I've had a lot of opportunity to grow as I've been there, and Chemonics really invests in their people, and there's a lot of training opportunities. I've had opportunities to, advance in my position and now supervise folks, have, audiences a lot with leadership at the company and work alongside them, and really feel like I'm an integral part of not only my team, but the company as a whole, and have had a lot of great opportunities to really be stretched outside of my comfort zone. Been, people have, done things I didn't think maybe I was qualified to do. I've gotten to travel. So I think, and there's so much opportunity at Chemonics to work in so many different areas that I think I have stuck around as long as I have thus far, and can see myself staying, just because there's always a way to continue to stretch yourself and grow, and yeah, work on new and more challenging things.
Yeah, I would definitely echo a lot of that, Kylie, as well. I think what's also worth mentioning too is originally why I decided to join the program that I did. So as Kylie had too, I also had an internship that was working in business development and operations. And I guess the job functions themselves is just something that I enjoyed. Like there are all for undergrad, I was doing a lot of networking all the time. And during my internship, that's all that I basically did when I was there as well. I was just, in a sense, networking with I was just networking with a specific customer set that might want to buy the product that my company was selling. So that was the only difference. So I guess for me going into it, my view of business development was, I'm just going to get paid to network. To really dumb it down, that was essentially my view of what business development was. That being said, when I got back from my internship and finished my 4th year at UVA and I was applying to full-time jobs, my thought process sort of shifted then toward, okay, well, after I graduate, I don't necessarily want to just dive right back into it. I wanted to gain a stronger foundation for the actual skill set that's involved in sales, because I think that the skill set that's involved, whether it's your ability to network, it's being able to come up with the right messaging to grab someone's attention, it's having really good subject lines so you can get a hold of people. It's once you're on the phone, it's, how do you engage in that conversation? How much does the other person talk versus you? How do you sort of sell yourself and discuss the value that you bring to the table without coming off too salesy? So there are a ton of skill sets. Either there's just this skill set I think that I wanted to develop early on in my career, and thus that's why I decided to look on these various rotation training programs, like the one that IBM offered. 6 months of intensive sales training was a very challenging thing to do. Like, the motto of the whole entire program is, you better be comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's like the whole entire goal of the program is that. So they put us through all these different workshops. I did improv on like a daily basis, which is something that I've never done before. I was presenting multiple times a day. I was forced to do practice sales calls with 5 or 6 of my peers behind me, judging every word that I said. Like, it's extremely intense, but I think it was, when I look at it now, going into the position in the program, my whole goal was to develop this sort of unique skill set that many people don't necessarily seek out to learn, and they feel like they develop along the way. And there are certainly people who can develop it along the way. I just felt that for myself, as a great first step in my career, it would be a great skill set to develop. And now that I'm a couple years into it, I don't necessarily think that working in technology sales is where I'm destined to be, but being able to take the skill set that I've learned and translate that to a different industry, to a different company, to a different job function. In general, I think just the skills that I've learned, I've tried to make sure that are really translatable to other fields, right? So while some may be looking at this demo that they have to do as, oh, I have to understand this IBM solution and be able to sell it to people, I look at it as, no, like, I'm learning how to engage in a solution and share it with other people and help them understand the solution as well as I do, and answer any questions that they have about this. So I think I've just sort of tried to shape all of my experiences as me trying to get to a certain point when I'm ready to take a jump to a different role or a different field. So it's all basically been preparation for something different, which I haven't personally found what that is yet. So definitely a long-winded answer there, but I guess what I would say is that all decisions that I made during undergrad, for my internships, for the clubs that I joined, to the role that I have right now, it's all been sort of to prepare myself something that I haven't figured out what.
Well, I think that's really encouraging to know that students don't have to have it all figured out now, right? That, think this will evolve, the career goals will evolve over time, and your first job may be related or may not be related to where you end up. I want to kind of jump into something you both talked about a little bit, about kind of the skills that maybe you had or that were required when you came into your role. Kylie, could you talk a little bit about some of those skills that you think were attractive to Chemonics and what you're realizing are important skills that you have on the job? So maybe our students can start building those skills now.
Sure. Yeah. So I think definitely, when you're looking, and I've been doing some hiring for my team recently, when you're looking at resumes, I think kind of the dual with having the interest in development, because that's something we really look at, which is not necessarily relevant for, all PT careers, certainly. that I kind of had the interest in global public health. And then I think the econ background, I was really, both my parents are like financial people, and they were really they were encouraging me of that I needed to have this kind of harder skill set to match kind of the other interests. So that's kind of why I stuck with the econ. So I think, looking at my profile initially, when you don't have too much, you hopefully have some internships, but too much work experience, that you could kind of showed a true interest in the sector, but also matched it with, some really like analytical skills, I think was beneficial. I will say that 90% of what I do or more, I don't think it was nothing. I've learned on the job. And you learn as you go. I think in college, you're learning, like you're setting the seeds of so many of those things. Like I do so much writing, and, all of you are, I'm sure, always, writing papers and things like that. And I think that definitely learning how to, really write and write concisely. I mean, right now I started asking candidates that were applying to our BD positions if they could provide a writing sample, because of that, to me, was just a non-starter. If I couldn't, see that they could really, write effectively. So I think writing has been a huge skill set. I'd say the other one, which I definitely didn't come in with, but would look in candidates now, is Excel. I wish I'd learned more Excel. I've taken like some online classes in Excel, and I still would like to get better. But I think that is, I'm sure, in so many different jobs, but I mean, it's really a critical skill. So I'd say that one as well. And then I'd say others are, I mean, just a general like enthusiasm for what you're doing. I would say in both, although it's different with what Troy does and I do, it is a lot of people skills. You're having a lot of meetings, both you're working with your team, or a lot of times I'm getting people around the company to come and work on a proposal effort that have like a busy job. So I'm having to convince them to do something that they don't want to do. And so kind of having this like team mentality, and also being, driven that you're passionate about what you're doing. I think as much as that sounds maybe like kind of soft and a little silly, like it definitely, when you're interviewing someone, you can tell if they're passionate about the work, because it's also a lot of work when you're working on, for what we do, the proposals are a really quick turnaround, and it's all hands on deck, and you really have to be, ready to work with a team. So I'd say just kind of communication skills is definitely a big one as well.
So something that I noticed about both of your experiences is that while you may have focused on, for you, Kylie, the passion has been the work, international development. For Troy, it's been more of the job function, building relationships, and networking, right? You both found these themes that interested you. So that's something for our students to think about as well. Okay. You don't have to have, a passion in a particular topic. It can be, interacting with people or a certain kind of job function. Other questions from our students? I definitely have more that we can, and Flora and I both have other questions we can launch into.
Yeah, Jen, I can just tag on to what you were saying too, just in case anyone else wants to as well. But yeah, I guess I would definitely agree with that as well. And just because that the decisions that I've made so far have been to gain a certain skill set, it doesn't necessarily mean that having a more mission-driven approach like Kylie has had isn't something that appeals to me. It's just been more so something that I haven't exactly found yet, right? So I guess her decision was to go into international development. My decision was first to really build the skill set so that I can then bring this skill set to whatever mission that I'm able to find as well. And I think that generally speaking, something, and you sort of touched on this before, Jen, when I was an undergrad, I felt like there was so much pressure to figure out what your whole entire career is going to be, like while you're in college, because they ask you, where do you see yourself in 5, 10, even 20 years? And then so there's this pressure to find like the perfect career path, and then just dive into that. And I don't necessarily think that that's the approach for everyone. I think it definitely works for some people who have really specific passions, whether it's law school, being a doctor. Those are very specific passions, I think, where that sort of approach makes sense. I think for those, especially those who are interested in some sort of business but aren't exactly sure what their functions are, which is mostly econ majors, I would venture to say, the approach that I've taken has been more about viewing each internship, each club that you join, everything as sort of, even your first time job, I think especially, as a stepping stone towards something. And whatever that something is something you're going to figure out once you get there. But I think that when you're looking at these different opportunities, that really figure out what exactly means most to you now, and then sort of gauge and change what you're actually looking for and what you are going to do based on your experiences that you sort of get. So rather than viewing as like your first job after graduation, your internship says this is end all be all. If I decide to go into business development, I'm going to be in this one for the rest of my life. Or I decide to go into international development, I'm going to stay in this for the rest of my life. I think it's view it more so as like a stepping stone rather than as an end all be all. So I just think that that's something too. Advice I think that you gave me, Jen, and advice that I think should be definitely passed on when people are looking at jobs and internships.
I have a question. That I think Jen's last question touched on it a little bit, but I wanted to delve a little bit deeper. The roles that you, Kylie, and Troy both described seem to me to have some sort of separation, at least from what I understand you learn in something like an econ department, in an econ major. So I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit to what you brought from the knowledge you learned while studying at UVA into your roles. I know, Kylie, you mentioned that specifically, like, most of what you learned, and I'm sure for most jobs, most of what you learn is on the job, but if you could touch a little bit on that.
Yeah, sure. I would say, I mean, I think econ, you kind of take a systems approach to problems. I mean, I think also, I mean, specifically in supply chain, you are thinking about supply and demand and the ecosystem around the availability of these health products, and you're looking at market dynamics. There are elements, I'd say, and I think having some of just a background of knowledge enabled me to kind of pick up on the technical side, because as much as I'm not implementing, a market dynamic strategy in Kenya, I'm writing about how we would do that. But I think knowing, kind of having that basis of knowledge and being able to, okay, I don't totally understand what they're talking about here, but I know I have a background in the market forces that are at play. In this context, it would look like that here. So I think kind of the way that you're maybe being taught to think and more like holistically, I think then could be applied to these more like specific situations and give you a bit more of a ground to stand on when you're trying to learn about these more specific topics. So I think that side of things, I think also like on my team, not that econ is specifically related to like budgeting and Excel, but I think it gave me a comfort level, and I've kind of become like on my team more someone who is quick to dive into that type of like financial analysis. And I think it was some comfort from like, I really liked when I was in undergrad that I had to use my brain in different ways. And that's part of why I kind of did the double major. And that when I was in econ, I had to think more analytically, and I still had to do math. And I think, I mean, the statistic stuff, sometimes now things will come up and I'm like, oh, I did this in econometrics. Like, what did it look like? And so stuff like that will come up occasionally. And I think at least being able to be like, I don't remember that now, but I did, and have that basis of knowledge, it kind of helps, I think, you have a little bit less barrier to entry. I wouldn't say it's like a super direct correlation, but I definitely wouldn't say it's, not applied at all. But I also think in a way it's encouraging that, we're like, when I'm looking to hire folks, like I want to, if I also see you're an econ major, I'm like, okay, you were like very tenacious and you made it happen. And you, it's not an easy field. And I think some of those skills are just important. And like, I want someone who's just going to like dive in and figure it out. And sometimes that's what you have to do in econ. So I think sometimes it can even speak to those things. That when you're looking for someone entry level, like they don't need to have all of these crazy hard skills. I mean, like technical skills, because so much is learned on the job, unlike if you're, an engineer.
Yeah, I would definitely echo a lot of that. I think that studying econ for me was definitely more about developing a certain mindset. And I think that mindset is all about finding and discovering the underlying incentives that people follow for general human behavior and being able to figure out what that is for each company and then each individual at that company. So it's being able to discuss financials with the CFO, but then discuss discuss, for example, the effect that AI is going to have on employee morale with the COO. So it's being able to sort of be open to different perspectives on issues. I think is definitely something that I've been able to translate from my econ background. So when I was there, in addition to taking econometrics and all the quantitative courses, I also took economics of Africa and economics of the Middle East. And I think taking those classes sort of helped train my mind to be open to a variety of perspectives and possibilities, and really to be able to dive down into the underlying why things are happening. So on the surface, it may seem like this CEO doesn't have the exact or isn't willing to pay for a certain solution that you have. And it's being able to sort of dive deeper into where those numbers exactly come from and what's driving those decisions to then be able to sort of shift or to sort of encourage a shift in those behavior to then be able to open that CEO up to, or make them more perceptive, I guess you could say, to sort of new ideas. So what I would say is that it's definitely been more about understanding human behavior and what drives the actions behind us, which has been definitely very helpful for me specifically when I'm working with C-level executives on a daily basis. Having the ability to communicate with a variety of different people and understanding their motivations, I think has been huge for me. And I think that's one of my biggest takeaways from taking the classes that I did in econ. But as Kylie said too, a lot of this is also taught once you get there. There's only so much that you can learn and study before you get to the job. But I guess more specific to IBM, what we really look for is to really put it as plainly as possible. We just look for people who are able to have a good, intelligent conversation or who are able to ask the right questions. So the personalities that aren't necessarily really want to drive the whole conversation, be talking 80% of the time. It's more about being able to ask the right questions and empathize with the other person that you're speaking to. And I think that econ definitely helped me develop that skill set. Hope that helps.
Thank you.
Other questions from the students? I want to ask questions about the pandemic, but I want to allow other people to ask questions if they have any right now. Can Troy and Kylie, could you both talk about how the pandemic has affected your work? And any advice that you might have for our students as they enter a job market, as they think about internships or full-time jobs entering during this time of the pandemic. First, how it's affected your work. Thanks.
Sure. So it's impacted, I can kind of talk about it from two lenses, because we are working on a global supply chain program. And so we are actually like kind of hands-on with the pandemic, procuring ventilators and sending them to countries and managing, most of our suppliers are based in China and India. And so the effects that that's having on our supply chain, and ensuring that we are still getting products to patients has certainly, this has definitely rocked our world. And we have, folks who are working day in, day out to ensure that patients are getting their products. I don't work on the implementation side, so my work isn't affected in that way. But I will say that we have seen more funding opportunities to support COVID response, because we are in the business of global health and global health supply chains. So I, had the opportunity to lead a proposal effort where we were looking at COVID response in Nigeria and how could we be working with civil society organizations to kind of introduce a multifaceted approach to detection and treatment. So I've had some opportunities to work on COVID specific related funding opportunities. So that's kind of on the way it's affected just from working in public health. I'd say more on the kind of the BD side. We've definitely seen some delays, I'd say, in like programs that we thought were going to come out that have taken longer, or that we're evaluating, thought we were going to get a result, and that's taken a bit longer. A lot, though, again, because so many of those decision makers are maybe diverted. Now they're less focused on our upcoming malaria program and more focused on COVID response in these countries. On like day-to-day job function, we have started using like Microsoft Teams over the pandemic. And so that has definitely been a huge way, just like practically, that my day-to-day has changed. That is like our source of all things, and we're on video calls all the time. And also using these, how can we use these different channels to really continue communication across. I work really closely with a team of about 8 people. And so just managing communications in a different way. My supervisor actually had started working remotely about a year before the pandemic. So I do think that was helpful of kind of developing some of those like remote working and communication strategies a little bit before the whole world went remote. Those are the main things. Also, we can't travel. So whereas I used to get to do probably an international trip maybe every other month, and we would travel because we were working with stakeholders trying to gauge like what are the issues on the ground in this country, what are the priorities, and how can we then reflect that in our approach to this like program. So it's different than of like I was selling them a service right there. It's information gathering, and so because it's information gathering, it's not necessary. And so we've had to find other ways of getting that type of like on the ground information. And so we've worked through like local consultants. Is there somebody that's in Mozambique that we could hire that then we can have go, hold some meetings for us? Or we've used this like online consultant, like expert database called On Frontiers, and done these like expert consultancies with folks who have, understanding in certain areas. So we definitely had to get a bit more, we've had to kind of rework the way that we gather information from the countries in which we work that we're now, quite far away from. Yeah.
And then I would say for me, the pandemic hasn't really affected my job functions, just because I've been a remote employee for almost a year and a half now. So a lot of my day-to-day hasn't really changed. I'm same as before. I've been working from home, taking a lot of Zoom calls. The only difference that I would say is, as Kylie mentioned, that there's been a lot less travel. So usually they're sending us to a couple of different conferences a year. I've been encouraged to go on site and visit a customer, or perhaps we go into an office for a meeting or two every now and then. But so I guess that's all ceased, but the actual job functions of my day-to-day, the outreach, the meetings, they've all been virtual, and they obviously are still virtual now to this day, and will definitely be through the end of this year and probably into next year as well. In terms of more broadly for IBM, I think working in technology right now, a lot of companies I think are just trying to figure out how to really survive during this time. And as such, just a lot has really changed, whether it's in their budget. So the certain solutions that they had budgeted for the year, now all of a sudden that has to be diverted to helping their employees work remotely, or the spots that they had open hiring, now the budgets that were supposed to go to filling those positions are now going to be directed towards something else. So I guess that then tags along to the advice that I would have for you all, like on the job hunt. at this like during the pandemic. I'd say specifically to IBM, there have been a lot of hiring freezes for a lot of teams, and that's internal hires. So even like for myself, when I'm looking for a field position, as I'd mentioned, a lot of the teams just aren't hiring right now, and that most likely won't open it up until the turn of the year, hopefully. It seems like there's a lot being placed on once it turns to 2021, a lot of things are going to change. And you may have a lot of different views on the pandemic and COVID in general, but it sounds a little crazy to me that January 1st, everything's going to be closed and there are no job openings, and all of a sudden there's going to be a ton of job openings. All the companies going to be open on January 1st of 2021. But that being said, I guess my biggest advice for you all during this time would be patience, because a lot of companies now really haven't had to experience anything like this before. So they're trying to figure out new ways of doing things, new ways to hire people, etc. And with that, as I mentioned, there are a lot of hiring freezes right now. So companies aren't willing to take on people at this time or commit to taking people on this time, especially even 6 months from now when things could look really different around the summer, when some of you might be looking to take on full-time jobs or an internship. So I guess having that patience and understanding that these companies are trying to figure out ways to hire you all, I think that's definitely crucial. But it's also being able to apply to being open to more jobs than you originally were. So if you had one company you really want to intern at, and you've been talking with them, and they're on a hiring freeze now, I guess this is a great opportunity for you to explore other careers and other ideas that you might not have necessarily thought of before. So I guess those are the tips that I would have for all of you during this time. That being said, if any of you are interested in learning more about working at IBM, definitely reach out to me as well. We still have internships going on because most of our jobs are all remote. So that's also an option too. And any interest there, definitely reach out to me as well. Any questions too, I can definitely be helpful on a number of fronts. So.
I would say that, I mean, this is probably an area that companies are cutting back in because you are bringing in revenue, whether directly or indirectly, to the company development function. So whereas, there may be, reduced like project management for us, or, in other areas, more limited opportunities, it may be even more of a reason to look at some more like business development type opportunities, because that's, I would think, where companies are going to continue to invest in, because, that's what's going to then pull them out of it.
So it is almost 1, and we want to make sure that alums have enough time to get to their Zoom rooms for their office hours. So I want to thank you both again for spending time with us today. This is really informational and a great panel. Students, if you want to spend more time with Kylie or Troy, Jen did send the link for office hours in the chat, and you can open that link and sign up for 20 minutes with either of the 2 alumni. But that'll be the end of this panel. Thank you all for attending.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Flora. Thank you, Jen. Thanks, Kylie.
Great conversation. Thanks so much.